Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and breaking news. We were live as we were waiting for the written statement to come in, and now it is official. Alec Baldwin will be charged for involuntary manslaughter in the Rush shooting of Halyna Hutchins. We're still trying to gather the full statement from the DA, but we've gotten pieces. She's now tweeted, and we have Christopher Melcher here, attorney at law. How you doing, Christopher?
Oh, pretty good, Andy. It's good to see you after a pretty long break. And yeah, wow, this was a long time in the coming. I mean, they spent a lot of time thinking about this, and here finally we got the result of that investigation.
Now, I just want to put a preface. We're going to go through as we're still getting these things. I just don't want to be clear. I see this becoming a very political battle of people who hate Alec Baldwin for various reasons or beliefs he has. It's just frustrating to me because I don't understand why that has anything to do with this. This should have everything to do with gun safety, which is something that actor Alec Baldwin knew very well. He's been on sets for decades. He knows how this works. His colleagues, Clooney, Nicolas Cage, many have come forward expressing their frustration of how could you let this happen? This was such an unfortunate accident, but also something so preventable if he had followed his own safety rules that they put in place on these film sets. Now, I don't believe it was just him involved. I don't believe he did this on purpose. But I'm glad to see the DA is holding him accountable because a lot of people are just trying to give him a pass here, Christopher. But at the end of the day, firearm safety is incredibly important, especially on these film sets. And it really just felt like not only did he ignore it in his interviews, leading up to this, he was trying to put the blame elsewhere and it was all over the place. So now definitively the DA has charged. While Halyna's family did settle, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well, they did settle for their civil case. They were apparently going to finish the film. They got a payday. I'm curious if that's still going to happen now. Was this all secretly maybe part of the family's plan? Let's get a bigger payday from Alec now before the criminal charges are dropped. Let's talk about all of that. But first, let's go through what happened here. So, Christopher, he and Halyna Gutierrez-Reed are now going to be charged with involuntary manslaughter. Each face charges of involuntary manslaughter because the jury will be asked to choose between the two counts. The DA said Baldwin will be charged in the alternative with the two counts of manslaughter, meaning that a jury would decide not simply if they were guilty, but under which definition of involuntary manslaughter they were guilty. Can you help and then Dave Hall, there's some more we're going to get through, but before we get to that, can you explain what this means in your opinion?
Sure. So involuntary manslaughter in New Mexico law, they have a law that covers this situation. It says that if you're engaged in a lawful act, which here is making a movie, that could result in death, which means using a gun on the set of making that movie, and you fail to use caution or circumspection, which is reasonable safety guidelines, which he failed to do, and a death results, which happened, then you're guilty of manslaughter. It's that simple. So the charges are not surprising to me. I know they're very surprising to Alec in the interviews that he's given previously, that he actually said, like, I will never be charged. I didn't do anything wrong. That's just not true. When you look at the rules of gun safety, treat every gun as loaded. That's the number one rule. And so he's violated, everyone on that set violated that. They have to assume that the gun is loaded. That's just a basic safety rule. This is not a prop gun. A lot of people say that. It's a real gun. It's a real gun. And was supposed to have, though, dummy rounds in it. And so under the rules of gun safety, treat it as always loaded. You never point it at somebody unless you want to shoot them. You're always going to ensure that it's, fingers off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, all that good stuff. Violated all those rules. Then there's industry specific rules for making a motion picture. These apply to all films. And it says, number one, the producer is ultimately responsible for all safety on the set, including gun safety. He was a producer. So he was in multiple roles on this film. So as a producer, he bears the ultimate responsibility for the safety of everything that happens. That responsibility is then delegated down to the prop master when a gun's involved. The prop master can then delegate it down to a armorer, which we had Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, who was totally incompetent in her job, not qualified, and then everyone that's handling that gun is supposed to be under the supervision of the prop master or armorer. And so all these rules were violated. Alec Baldwin, takes possession of this real firearm. And what the expectation was under these safety rules is that the armorer would demonstrate to him, hey, Alec, I'm opening up the cylinder. I'm showing you that these rounds in here are dummy rounds. You can see that there's a hole drilled in the side. I'm shaking it. There's a BB in there. So you can know there's no gunpowder in it. All of these are these dummy rounds. I'm giving it to you. You can verify for yourself. That needs to happen. That is supposed to happen on every shoot, every time that gun's handled. None of that. This was done completely carelessly. It was left on a cart. There were live rounds because they were using, not Alec, but Gutierrez-Reed and others were using this gun for target practice on the set. You're never to do that. They violated every single rule. He was completely reckless. He took a real gun with bullets in it without checking in it, pointed it at another human being and pulled the trigger. He's absolutely guilty. He's saying that, hey, I didn't pull the trigger. Guns don't just generally go off by themselves. You can drop them, throw them around like that. They just generally, unless it's a really, really bad gun, just doesn't spontaneously fire. This gun was in his hand. The only reason why it went off is that he had his finger on the trigger. Now, he may have cocked it while the finger was on the trigger and possibly gone off, but the FBI and the New Mexico authorities have tested that gun every which way, all kinds of conditions to see, would it just spontaneously fire? How would you get it to fire? And part of their case is to be able to debunk or refute any insinuation that this gun just went off on its own. So I'm not surprised by the charges. I think the charges are appropriate, and particularly against the armorer, because she was the one that was supposed to know what she was doing, and she was absolutely reckless, and she bears the highest responsibility in this story.
No, awesome. And as you were saying that, we did finally find it. Thank you to my team. Amazing work as always. It's a terrible press release though. It's hidden in a Facebook page no one could find. But here it was. Here's the First Judicial District Attorney's press release. Producer Alec Baldwin and armorer to face involuntary manslaughter charges in death of Halyna. Assistant director pleads to negligent use of deadly weapon. New Mexico First Judicial Attorney announced on Thursday that in keeping with her commitment to pursue justice for all victims and to hold everyone accountable under the law, her office before the end of the month will file criminal charges in the Rust film set shooting. Rust actor and producer Alec Baldwin and armorer Halyna Gutierrez-Reed will each be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the death of Halyna on the film's Santa Fe County set. Assistant Director David Halls has signed a plea agreement for the charge of negligent use of deadly weapon. The terms include a suspended sentence and 6 months of probation. Copy of the plea agreement will be available after it has been filed with the court. No charges will be filed specific to the non-fatal shooting of Rust director Joel Souza. After a thorough review of the evidence and the laws of the state of New Mexico, I have determined that there is sufficient evidence to file criminal charges against Alec Baldwin and other members of the Rust film crew. On my watch, no one is above the law and everyone deserves justice. Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed will be charged on the alternative with 2 counts of manslaughter, meaning that the jury would decide not simply if they were guilty, but under which definition of involuntary manslaughter they were guilty. The first charge can be referred to simply as involuntary manslaughter. For this charge to be proved, there must be underlying negligence. Under New Mexico law, involuntary manslaughter is a 4th-degree felony and is punishable up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. Charge also includes the misdemeanor charge of negligent use of a firearm, which would likely emerge as a matter of law. Other charges: involuntary manslaughter in the commission of a lawful act. This charge requires proof that there was more than a simple negligence involved in a death. This also is a 4th-degree felony, punishable up to 18 months and $5,000. This charge includes a firearm enhancement or added mandatory penalty because a firearm was involved. Firearm enhancement makes the crime punishable by a mandatory 5 years in jail. If any of these 3 people, Alec, Hannah, David, had done their job, Halyna would be alive today. It's that simple, said Andrea Reeb, the special prosecutor appointed by the DA of this case. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of criminal disregard for safety on the Rust film set. In New Mexico, there is no room for film sets that don't take our state's commitment to gun safety and public safety seriously. Amen. That's what it should be. Harmick, Awaz, and Reeb will formally file charges with New Mexico's First Judicial District Court before the end of the month. Following the filing of charges, each defendant will be issued a summons with the charging information. Shortly after receiving the summons, each defendant is required to make a first appearance, a procedure that is often referred to in other jurisdictions as an arraignment. The first appearance can be done virtually, and defendants can even move to have their first appearance waived. First appearance dates are set by the court, not by the district attorney. Given that First Judicial District, New Mexico is only impaneling grand juries under certain circumstances due to COVID, the next step after first appearance will be a preliminary hearing. In this process, a judge takes on the role of the grand jury. The DA and special prosecutor present their case to the judge. The judge then rules whether there is probable cause to move forward with a trial. The dates for a preliminary hearing will be set by the court, not by the DA. However, preliminary hearings are typically scheduled within 60 days of charges being filed. There is a very clear process for pursuing justice in this case. We are committed to upholding the integrity of that process to ensure equal justice under the law. Once charges are filed, more detailed paperwork will be available online through the court that details the evidence the DA and the special prosecutor cite. An announcement will be made to the public when the charges have formally been filed. The DA received the final Santa Fe County Sheriff's Report on October 27th and moved quickly to carefully and thoroughly review the evidence, allowing the DA to make her decision on charges less than 3 months after receiving the initiated report. So there you go. There's the full report that we've gone through. Let's talk about David Halls, and then we'll talk about those two manslaughters. Signed a plea agreement. Do you think this was them working with him to try to basically get Alec and Hannah, have someone to definitively make their case even more solid?
I don't think so. A lot of times they do need in multi-defendant cases to flip one against the other. This is not that type of situation. The story is, we all know the story. If you followed it, it's out there. We know what role everyone played. Some of them have given statements. So David Halls was the first assistant director, and under the safety bulletin that governs the use of firearms on a movie set, the first AD is never in the line of authority or possession of that gun. That is not his role, should have never touched it, but he did. And so again, to show the recklessness of how they were treating this firearm on the set, this guy, Halls, was the one manipulating this gun. He's the one who grabbed it off of the armorer's cart when the armorer was not even there, grabbed it, handed it to Alec, and announced, cold gun, meaning that he's checked it when he hadn't actually checked it. This guy his role in this is really, really horrible. And so I'm not surprised that he took a plea, because that guy was going to be convicted and receive a harsh sentence. The reason why I think he took the plea was to mitigate or reduce his exposure to going to prison. And so by cooperating, by giving an early plea, the judge would take that into account and give him potentially a lower sentence than had he taken it to the mat. So I think that's all we're seeing there. This guy, like I say, it's already on record that he didn't really check the gun, and we all know he shouldn't have had possession of it. It really has no impact whether he took a plea or went to trial against how the jury potentially would have viewed Alec or Gutierrez-Reed, in my view.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, Legal Vice was earlier saying that someone was going to flip, and that might have helped, but you think there's probably enough here where no one even really needed to flip.
Yeah.
And then what about this? So this involuntary, the two versions of that, any explanation there from you? I mean, she's saying this is for the jury to then decide. She's putting both on the table so they can make that decision. Does that seem sound?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's a very technical point. And at the end of the trial, the jury will be given instructions of law on the various legal theories that they could convict on. And what I think she's indicating there is that the jury will have the right or ability to make a decision, obviously weighing the evidence to see if there's guilt on the various counts. And she's kind of alluding to various different types of manslaughter that could be charged. The one that I cited to, she's also referring to, which is the performance of a legal act that could involve death and the failure to use due circumspection in doing that. But there maybe could be a lesser form of manslaughter that's charged. And so, and also, again, looking at their different roles there in the safety chain, Alec as ultimately the one holding, the device in his hand and pointing it at Halyna Hutchins, versus Alec's role as a producer. So, we'll get into all that nuance. Alec, I don't know. I mean, he's given a lot of statements, which is unusual, and for a criminal defendant, the typical advice is don't say a word, and sometimes don't even talk at trial, don't testify in your own defense. So here he's given statements. All those will be admissible against him. Some of them are fine. It's just his reflection on what happened. But then there's also these expressions of bravado that we've heard, that I will not be charged. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't have my finger on the trigger. All this, which I kind of view as, it's just only his way of being able to survive this and process it, because he caused this, and it's a horrible thing to live with. And I think we're hearing more of him talking to himself and explaining how he can live with himself by making these affirmations that he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, I think that's totally spot on. It's strange to see. Do you think those comments are going to come back to haunt him in this trial? Can they be used against him?
Well, sure. And and we've heard a lot of comments about this story, and I love the debate and the different views on things. And, there's different camps of people. Some are like, hey, this dude's just an actor. He's not responsible for knowing anything. There's professionals on the set that are in charge of safety, and he, within reason, can rely upon those folks, and that's how he did, and therefore he didn't do anything wrong. And I think in those camp, I think if you talk to people in that camp, my guess is that they don't know anything about firearms. They don't have a background in the use of firearms. The people in my camp, are people who, like, I have a lot of training and experience with firearms from prior profession, and so we just don't play with these things. And it's down drilled to me, like I have even here, my kid's little thing. Like, if I wouldn't point this at you and I wouldn't put my finger on it. It's just ingrained into me that much that if you grew up with firearms, you have training and background in it, you just do not play with these things, because, bad things happen when you're not safe. And so in that camp, it's like, you do not take a gun from somebody and take their word for it that it's safe and unloaded. You check it yourself, or if you're not qualified to check it, you have somebody visually, physically examine it in your presence to saying this thing is not loaded. And, and so one of the ultimate tests, and, it's just like, would he's sitting there floating this thing around without even testing it. Would he have done that if his kid was standing in front of him? Would he have put that to his head and done that? How much does he really test David Halls, who's the first assistant director, the guy who just runs in the room, says, "Cold gun, here you go, Alec." How much does he trust that person? And who for the record,
isn't supposed to be handling them ever. Like, on a set, the AD does not handle the firearms. That's completely out of the process. My brother is an AD, and I've talked to him multiple times about this. He's like, I would have never. That's not how it goes. I stop the set, so the person specialist comes forward to show it and show everybody and unloads it. Like, there's a process that they were just skipping because they clearly were under budget or over time, and that's not an excuse. I am curious. Well said. I am curious though of the plea, like the agreement, the settlement with the civil case with the family. I mean, I have my own theory. I hate to speculate for this family. I feel for them and sending so much love to that family. But it did sort of just feel like, really, he's going to produce the movie and all this. But part of me wondered, do you think there was maybe a version of this where that was a bigger payday and he maybe was in talks with the DA, knowing that, yeah, there still could be a criminal charge to get justice that way, but now we can get enough money for the family and the son to at least do the best we can do, which would have been better than fighting a long civil case? Is my theory crazy, or could that be a possibility, you think?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know all the background on that, because they settled and they didn't go to court. Certainly there's insurance involved, and so there's some money there. Whether Alex kicked in some of his own dough, I don't know. I got to imagine, that's a pretty healthy settlement. I got to imagine that had they gone to court on the civil case, he would have lost because, criminal is you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's a very difficult thing to do. Civil, it's preponderance of the evidence. It's more likely than not that this happened. So he was going to lose dead bang on the civil case. I think it was smart to settle. I think that, because a charging decision was pending against him. And so to make a early settlement, make amends with the family of Halyna,
Yeah.
that could have influenced the prosecutor to saying like, hey, they kind of worked this out, and they're kind of moving forward. So I think that was a smart tactical decision. In terms of the criminal trial, that generally is not going to be told to the jury. The jury would probably be excluded from hearing about any settlement because that could be confusing and think that that's an admission of guilt, which it's not. So I don't think the jury's going to hear about it. I don't think it's going to come up at all at the criminal trial.
Steph, did you have any questions?
I suppose the main question that I've got, knowing like the technical nuance behind why I believe he pulled that trigger. There was no way that it went off without that trigger being pulled. How can, in your mind, Alec Baldwin defend himself and say that it's not his fault without blaming it on someone else? Like, because ultimately, like, the personal responsibility does come down to him, because without that gun being in his hand, Halyna Hutchins would still be alive. So if we looked at devil's advocate here, like, what do you think would be the legal strategy, I suppose, for Alec Baldwin to try and defend himself on this one? Is it a case of he'll just blame other people and that's it?
Sure. So I think he's gonna come in. I would imagine he will testify because he did give some interviews and he's already spoken about it. So I imagine he'll testify, try and give his best pitch to the jury. I think he'll say that, hey, he'll play down. I'm just a dumb actor. I don't know anything about guns. I'm just an actor. And I'm relying on all these other people who are doing things. I am handed this thing. I am told it's a cold gun. I have been on X amount of movie sets where things like this have happened before. He'll probably leave out the fact that every one of those other occasions that they actually showed him, demonstrated to him that the thing was unloaded. So probably leave that part out. And then just saying, hey, I've been doing this a long time. It's a lot of pressure, long days. We've got to get these shots in. We can't, and I'm relying on these people. I didn't really understand David Hall's role versus Hannah's role in the case. He gave me the gun. He said it was a cold gun. I'm good to go. And so I reasonably relied on it. So he's going to say that for sure. And then he's going to say that he didn't pull the trigger. And so there's been some testing of guns, the identical version of that gun. And this is an old revolver like you would see in, like cowboy movies and stuff. So you have to pull, there's, thing back here, you have to pull it.
The hammer,
and you have to pull that back, cock it. And then you have to depress the trigger. So his theory, I think, is going to be that he cocked the hammer, and it just and maybe let the hammer go, and the hammer hit the firing pin, and the thing went off. I think that's what he's going to claim. That it was a malfunction. His finger was never on the trigger. It wasn't a scene. Apparently, we were supposed to be shooting anything. He was just going to display it to the camera. So I think he's going to say that. And then it's really going to come down to the testing of that actual firearm under similar conditions. So they've got to do every single different permutation of cocking halfway, cocking full way, letting it drop, finger on the trigger, no finger on the trigger. They're going to have to test that thing every single way. There'll be a criminologist or firearms expert who'll come in for the prosecution, will say, I tested it every single way, jury. The only way this thing can go off is if you press the trigger. So they got to say that because if it's a malfunction, it kind of makes it's going to muddy the waters. So I think that's going to be his second defense. And they only need one juror to saying like, hey, I don't have that state of conviction in my mind to say that he's guilty and say I'm going to say not guilty, and that'll be a hung jury. So I think that's what he's going for, to plant that enough reasonable doubt in the minds of at least one juror that the safety responsibilities were not really on him, and that he didn't press the trigger.
So you do feel confident that the this preliminary hearings and stuff, when they go to the judge, there will be a trial? You think this is going to this will not be pushed away before it even gets there?
Oh, absolutely. So at the there's all these steps in our really justice system that works pretty well. And so we have probable cause determination that's made by the police before an arrest. We have a review by a prosecutor on their obligation to ensure that they don't charge somebody unless they feel that they can get a conviction. So we've gone through those two things. And then the next step is he has the right to a preliminary hearing to have a judge determine whether there's probable cause that a crime has been committed and that he committed it. Now, that's a very easy burden to meet. So it's not like, hey, is there reasonable doubt? Is he going to win or not? It's just like, hey, do we have enough to go forward with trial? Absolutely enough to go forward with trial. So he'll lose that. He'll contest that. And then, they'll go through all their motions, and then there'll be a trial. Now, potentially he could make a deal, because the prosecutor threw out a bunch of other charges that are pretty lightweight. We've got the highest one, which is the manslaughter type that I referred to, with the enhancement of a use of a weapon, 5 years minimum mandatory in prison. But then we have on the low end, negligent use of a firearm. And that's a misdemeanor where it could be no jail time. It could be a fine. So, maybe something is done, because they can't walk away from this. You can see built into the statement, it's like, hey, no one's above the law. So they went out of their way to say that, saying like, hey, we're not going to just sweep this under the rug because it's Alec Baldwin. So they had to do something. And but they gave him some avenues out to plea bargain that could be pretty low level. And so do they really want this dude sitting in a jail cell? Probably not. But they also can't walk from it. So maybe they wrangle a little bit in court, and then there's some kind of plea by Alec to, hey, negligent use of firearm, I'll take the plea. He goes on the press circuit and says, yeah, I'm taking full responsibility, so sorry. And he doesn't do a day in jail. And then the armorer, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed's the one who actually goes to jail or prison.
When they both should be held responsible. I know you got somewhere else to go, interviews and such. Final thoughts or anything else legally you want to add as you leave?
Well, like I say, it's been a long break, so I miss both of you and everybody else. So I'm really happy to be back. And it's like, hey, we've been following the story for a long time. It's really cool to, see a conclusion, whatever the conclusion was. It's like, hey, wheels of justice move very, very slowly, but, significant event today, and obviously a lot more to come.
Today, there are protocols on a set. He didn't follow them, and he wasn't just an actor. He was a producer. This has nothing to do with feelings of Alec Baldwin. Far too many people are going to politicize this, and they shouldn't. This is about gun safety, and he knows better. He knew better, and he shouldn't have done it. At the end of the day, no matter what Hannah and Dave did, he pulled the trigger. He can say he didn't all day long, but he did. And it was during a rehearsal. It was just so stupid. It was all so preventable. It was an accident. I do believe it was an accident. But that's why the involuntary part of the charge. We will be covering this more, getting their thoughts. If you missed the full show, make sure you hit that join button, become a member. If you're watching live, consider becoming a member. You can always watch our full shows here on the channel. We got lots more to talk about. So if you're watching live, don't go anywhere, and make sure you subscribe to all these amazing people: Legal Vices, Eric Hunley, Steph the Alter Nerd, Christopher Melcher. A lot of amazing feedback and commentary here. Thank you guys so much for watching on the replay.